Dear audience, today we will dive into the world of Mughal architecture and compare the Mughal architecture with the Muscovite architecture. We will discover their techniques and we will dive into the world of art and culture, and we will also discover how we can take inspiration from their calligraphy to create our own modern calligraphy. We will dive into their history and step by step evaluate the regime of each and every emperor. We will compare the domes and the substructures of the Mughal architecture with the Muscovite architecture. So let's get started. Fascinating introduction. Dear audience, now let us start with the learning outcomes. By the end of this lesson, you should have identified substructures of Mughal buildings, recognized the purpose of the pishtak, and have drawn a pishtak using Mughal designs and patterns. Dear audience, let us begin with the introductions to Mughal. The army of Mughal Empire was forced by the Mughal emperors and established their empires in the 15th century and expanded it to greatest extent at the beginning of the 18th century. Although its origins, like the Mughals themselves, were cavalry-based armies of the Central Asia, its essential form and structure was established by the empire's third emperor, Akbar the Great. Now, dear audience, let's talk a bit about Mughal architecture. Mughal architecture is a type of Indo-Islamic architecture developed by the Mughals in the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries. Throughout even changing and extent of their empire in the Indian subcontinent, it developed their styles of earlier Muslim dynasties in India and an amalgam of Islamic, Persian, Turkic and Indian culture. Mughals buildings had a uniform pattern of structure and character, including large Babylons. Dear audience, now let us talk about the Muscovite architecture, also known as the Russian architecture. Is a tradition whose roots lie in early Russian wooden architecture and in the architecture with its centers from the era which had an empire that influenced the architecture of Russia and the culture of Russia. In other phases of Russian history, the architecture was developed independently and characterized by the national and local features. After the fall of the Russian Empire, the architectural history continued for centuries. Dear audience, now let us talk about Pishtak. Pishtak is in Islamic arts is an architecture in Iran. It is the Pishtak, a formal gateway that serves to emphasize a building's presence and importance. Mughals used this Pishtak to inspire the grandeur in their to awe-inspire their visitors from other continents and to show them how much great skills they possessed about architecture. Dear audience, now I want to talk about calligraphy. Calligraphy is a visual art related to writing. It is the design and the exclusion of a lettering with a broad-tipped instrument, brush or other writing instrument. A complementary calligraphic practice can be defined as the art of giving form to signs as an expressive and in a skillful manner. Modern calligraphy ranges from functional inscriptions and the designs to fine arts pieces, whereas the letters may or may not be categorized in this. Dear audience, now let me give you a brief information about the Mughal emperor. Mughals ruled our region for about 300 years. Mughals were Muslims from Central Asia who laid the foundation of the most glorious Muslim rule in our region. They had amazing architecture. Mughals formed a vast empire and brought stability in these regions. Some of the main Mughal emperors and their contributions are as follows. Firstly, we will talk about Zahiruddin Babur, who laid the foundation of Mughal dynasty in the subcontinent. He enabled the Lodi dynasty he ended the Lodi dynasty by defeating Sultan Ibrahim Lodi in the Battle of Panipat. He took the advantage of the chaotic situation in the subcontinent and established the empire which will last for the next 300 years. He was a brilliant tactician who came from through Khyber Pass and was an exceptional commander. He had a huge disciplined and trained army. He developed many new strategies. He won critical wars and he introduced gunpowder in subcontinent and brought many agricultural changes and introduced many new crops. He was a good poet, writer, and his autobiography considered to be a classic addition in the world literature. Tozke Babri. Dear audience, now let us talk about Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar, who was the third ruler in the Mughal emperor. He was also called Akbar the Great. He was the most eminent and powerful ruler of the Mughal empire. He became an emperor at the age of 13 in 1556 after his Humayun father's sudden death. He re-established the Mughal empire and introduced many reforms in army, government, finance and religion, at the same time capturing new territories. He divided his empire into 15 well-established provinces under his royal governors. To rule effectively, he appointed a prime minister and ministers. With his powerful administration and military insight, he was able to win many battles. He restored and abolished the jizya tax and restored many rights of Hindus. He worked towards trade and economic development and made many beautiful buildings in the city of Fatehpur Sikri and Agra Fort were built during his rule. He died in 1605. Dear audience, now let us talk about Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan took over in 1627 after his father Jahangir's sudden death. He began closer to his grandfather and started his journey of success and expanded his empire. He engaged in the production of textile and metalwork in local karkhanas, also known as factories. He flourished trade and economic activities. His regime was a prosperous one and he became extremely rich. And that is why Shah Jahan was able to spend a huge amount of money on art, music, literature, architecture and jewels. The famous peacock or Takhte-Taus, decorated with diamonds, rubies and other precious stones, were made on his orders. He is also known as the Builder King or the Engineer King in the Mughal Empire. His period is known as the golden period of architecture in the Mughal era. The most glorious buildings of Mughal era were constructed during his regime. The Taj Mahal, Lal Killa, Jamia Masjid, Moti Masjid, Wazir Khan Masjid, Shalimar Gardens and the Tomb of Jahangir are some magnificent buildings of his rule. He became seriously ill in 1657 and died in 1666. Dear audience, now let us talk about Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb took control of the Mughal Empire in 1656. He had all the qualities of a good empire. He was preferring to live a simple life without any extravagance. He especially had wars with troublesome with the type of Marathas and left his empire exhausted. He banned alcohol, gambling and music. Aurangzeb died in 1707. Anecdotal time. Now we will identify the substructures of Mughal buildings. These are called onion domes because they look like onions. These are called funnels, and they are located on the top of the onion domes. Now let's move on to next one. These are called arches, and these are the sub entryways of the Badshai Mosque. These are called minarets because they are towers and they promote the grandeur as well. These are called chhatris, where you can stay protected from the water and rain. And now this is the main entryway known as Pishtak, as I have discussed it before. Unique miscellaneous knowledge. Dear audience, now I am here to show you a very delicate piece of art, and you can see the calligraphy that is done on a leaf, and you can see the Mughal inspired calligraphy all over and the Turkish touch in it. It is so magnificent. A cessation for you. Today's session for you is to a little bit elaborate the Mughal history and to tell me why did the Mughals build these pishtaks, the main entryway. Tell me the purpose of it. Comment down below in the comment box. Dear audience, thank you once again for watching another video of the Twilight Zone. Like my videos, subscribe to my channel, and share my videos, and keep watching, keep following. Thank you.